Welcome back to the deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
Today we're gonna tackle the financials of the Cato Corporation,
The Cato Corporation, yeah.
that women's fashion retailer. I bet you've seen them. They're in practically every strip mall,
Oh
right?
yeah. They're pretty ubiquitous.
Right. So we've got a whole stack of their reports here. Their annual report for 2024,
Hmm.
plus the quarterly reports for the first 3 quarters of fiscal 2025.
Yeah.
It looks like they're navigating some, well, choppy waters in the retail world.
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack here. You know, what I find really interesting is how these reports give us a glimpse into how things like inflation and those supply chain issues we keep hearing about are actually playing out in the real world.
Yeah, it's not just theoretical anymore. It's right there in the numbers, huh?
Exactly. Right there in black and white.
Okay, so for those who might not be familiar, can you give us a quick rundown of what the Cato Corporation is all about?
Sure. In a nutshell, they're all about offering stylish clothing at affordable prices.
That value proposition, huh?
Yeah, that value proposition.
Yeah.
They've got over 1,000 stores,
Yeah.
mostly across the Southeast,
Okay.
operating under several different names, like Cato, Fashion, Persona.
Oh, yeah, yeah, those names ring a bell.
Yeah,
Which makes their recent sales dip even more interesting when you say. Their annual report showed a pretty big drop in sales for 2023.
yeah, they reported a 6.9% decrease
Yeah.
compared to the previous year.
6.9%. Ouch.
Not good. And the trend, unfortunately, continued through those first 3 quarters of 2025.
Hmm. Well, gotta figure inflation is playing a big role here. People are having to make tough choices about where they spend their money, especially with, those rising prices for groceries,
Oh,
gas.
absolutely. That's hitting
Yeah.
everyone's wallets.
Hmm.
Leaves people with less to spend on discretionary items like clothing.
Exactly. And then you throw those high interest rates on top of that.
Makes it even tougher to justify, splurging on a new outfit,
Yeah.
especially if you're relying on credit.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy.
Exactly. And then there's the whole supply chain chaos that's been plaguing just about everybody.
Ugh. Don't even get me started.
Well, Cato specifically called out disruptions, like that drought in the Panama Canal region, messing up those shipping routes.
Right.
Then you've got that ongoing conflict near the Suez Canal causing further delays. And then, of course, the congestion at Asian ports just driving up both shipping costs and lead times.
And on top of that, the U.S. port strike didn't help, and and the unrest in some Asian countries, just adding to those delays.
Absolutely. All of it just creates this domino effect, doesn't it?
It really does. I never really thought about how interconnected everything is. Events happening halfway across the world can ripple through and impact a company like Cato right here.
Oh, yeah. It's a perfect example of how globalized our economies really are. It's like trying to run a marathon, but with hurdles constantly popping up.
Yeah, those hurdles keep getting higher.
Right. So what are they doing to tackle these challenges? Well, it seems they're not just sitting around waiting for things to get better.
Right. So what kind of strategic moves are they making?
Well, they talked about strategically allocating their merchandise, sending different items to different stores, based on things like past sales in that location, the type of customer in that area, even the weather.
Oh, wow, that's actually pretty smart.
It is like playing chess with their inventory.
So they're not just sending like, the same stuff to every store, but they're really trying to tailor what they're offering to the specific needs and wants of each local customer base.
Exactly. And of course, they're laser focused on cost control, which is, well, crucial in this kind of environment, right?
Yeah, got to tighten the belt a little.
And then they're also beefing up their cybersecurity measures,
Mm.
trying to protect both their customers' data and their own operations. Kind of like reinforcing the castle walls just in case of a digital attack.
Right, you can't be too careful these days.
No, you can't.
All right, so now let's dig into some of the key financial takeaways from their reports. And one thing that really jumped out at me was this dual class stock structure. I'll be honest, I had to Google that one.
Dual class stock structure. Okay.
Can you break that down for us? Like, what does that mean and why does it matter in Cato's case?
Sure. So basically, it means they have two types of stock, Class A and Class B.
Right.
And the main difference is voting power. Class B shares, they're harder to trade, but they carry way more voting power than Class A shares, even though both usually receive the same dividends.
So it's like having a VIP pass, that gives you more say in those big company decisions.
Exactly.
So who holds most of those those powerful Class B shares.
Well, the founding family, they still hold a controlling stake through their ownership of Class B shares,
Right.
which gives them significant influence, right, over the company's direction.
Ah, so they still have a pretty firm grip on the wheel.
Oh, absolutely. You can think of that.
Okay. Let's talk earnings per share or, EPS, that all-important measure of profitability. What's the story there?
Well, because of this whole dual-class stock structure thing, it's important to look at how earnings are distributed between Class A and Class B shareholders.
Right.
Historically, they've received the same dividends,
Okay.
but it's something to keep an eye on, especially if the company starts facing, even tougher times financially.
Yeah, could get messy.
It could.
Okay, moving on. What about their online sales? Are they jumping on that e-commerce bandwagon like a lot of retailers are these days?
Well, you'd think so, right?
Hmm.
I mean, with everybody shopping online these days.
Right.
But surprisingly, e-commerce sales make up a tiny, tiny fraction of their total sales.
Tiny.
Less than 5% in 2023. It's like they're still really betting big on those physical stores.
Wow, that's pretty surprising in this day and age.
It is.
So how are they making money beyond just selling clothes in stores? What other revenue streams do they have going on?
Well, they have a credit card segment,
Yeah.
like a lot of retailers do. They offer their own branded credit cards to customers.
Right.
It's actually a pretty common move.
Yeah, yeah.
Gives customers a convenient way to pay, and often earn rewards. But it also creates another revenue stream for Cato through interest charges and fees.
Right. So it's like you scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of thing.
Exactly. But remember, it also comes with risks. If customers start defaulting on those credit card payments, especially with this economic climate, well, that can quickly become a problem for Cato.
So it's like they're almost acting as a mini bank.
Exactly, yeah. A mini
Huh.
bank with all the associated risks.
Okay. Speaking of risks, the reports mentioned an investment portfolio. What's in there and why should we care?
Well, primarily it's filled with bonds,
Yeah.
essentially loans to governments or corporations.
Okay.
As of February 3rd, 2024, their investments were valued at a pretty substantial $88.7 million.
Now.
Now, here's the catch. The value of those bonds can go up and down, just like, a seesaw.
So if interest rates go up, those bond investments could actually lose value.
Exactly.
That's a little unsettling.
It does add a certain amount of unpredictability to their overall financial picture.
Okay. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. Now, can you tell me more about this critical audit matter I keep seeing pop up? It sounds a little ominous.
It is a little bit of a red flag.
Hmm.
Think of it as the auditor saying, hey, we're a little worried about this. In this case, it's about how Cato is valuing its stores,
Right.
what accountants call impairment of long-lived assets. They're essentially questioning whether some of those stores might actually be worth less than what Cato is claiming on their books.
Hmm. So if their stores are potentially worth less than they're saying and their online sales are practically non-existent, are they headed for trouble?
Well, it's too early to say for sure, but it's definitely an area to keep an eye on.
Okay, I'm officially intrigued. This is shaping up to be a pretty interesting deep dive.
Yeah.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and zoom in on some of those intriguing details that really caught my eye. Starting with layaway sales. What's the deal with that?
Layaway. It's
Yeah.
like a blast from the past, isn't it?
It really is.
You know that old school system where you
Yeah.
reserve an item and pay for it in installments? Well, it might seem outdated, but it actually accounts for a notable chunk of their sales,
Chunk meeting.
about 3% in 2023.
Really? Who's still using layaway in this, instant gratification, buy now, pay later world?
It turns out layaway still appeals to certain customers,
Hmm.
particularly those who might not have access to credit cards or just prefer to avoid debt.
Makes sense.
Allows them to buy those bigger ticket items they might not be able to afford otherwise, by spreading the cost out over time.
Yeah, it's like a built-in budgeting tool, huh?
Yeah, you could say that. But from an accounting perspective, they don't actually count the revenue from those layaway sales until the customer picks up and fully pays for the merchandise.
Oh, interesting.
And they also tack on administrative fees, when
Yeah.
the layaway is started.
Mm.
And they can even charge restocking fees if the customer backs out.
Clever. So it's like a win-win for Cato.
You could say that.
Now let's talk sourcing. They mentioned relying heavily on overseas manufacturers.
Oh, yeah. This is actually this is key to their whole value pricing strategy.
Makes sense.
By sourcing most of their merchandise directly from from manufacturers overseas, mainly in Southeast Asia, they're able to keep those costs low and then, pass those savings on to their customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. But we've already seen how global events can really mess with their supply chain. So isn't this reliance on overseas manufacturers kind of a risky bet?
It is, definitely. It leaves them exposed to all sorts of potential disruptions. Geopolitical events like sudden trade wars or political instability. All that can throw a wrench in the works. And we've already seen how vulnerable those global supply chains are to natural disasters, pandemics.
Yeah, feels like anything can happen these days.
Right, and all of those things can really impact their ability um, to get their products to those stores on time, and of course, it can drive up costs.
So it's like they're constantly walking a tightrope, huh?
You could say that.
Okay, last but not least, let's decode this whole financial reporting and internal controls section. It always feels like it's written in a secret language.
Financial reporting
Yeah.
can be a bit dense, yeah. But essentially, yeah, Cato's management is saying, hey, our internal controls over financial reporting are effective.
Okay.
Now, this is something companies are required to do,
Right.
but it's important to remember that those internal controls are only as good as the people actually implementing them.
Yeah, it's like saying, I've got a great security system, but then you leave your front door unlocked.
Exactly.
Mm.
Now, what about this revolving credit agreement amendment they mentioned?
Yeah, I noticed they mentioned amending it several times recently. What does that tell us?
Well, it suggests that they might be facing some financial strain. Could mean they need to access more credit just to keep things running smoothly.
Okay.
And with interest rates rising, that borrowing gets more expensive, which could further squeeze their profits.
Not good. So it's not all sunshine and roses over there at Cato headquarters, is it?
It seems not.
What else should we be paying attention to in those reports?
Well, they mentioned that they're evaluating some new accounting standards, which might actually change how they report their financials in the future.
Oh.
These standards are, they're constantly evolving,
Right.
and it's crucial for companies to stay on top of them. It's kind of like playing a game where the rules keep changing in the middle of it.
Yeah, that can get frustrating.
Frustrating.
Okay, I'm already starting to see Cato in a whole new light, not just as that store at the mall, but as this complex business facing a whole web of challenges.
That's the way to do here, right?
This is getting good.
Feels like we've just finished the first chapter of a really juicy book. We've got the basic plot, but now we're ready to dive into all those fascinating details.
I love that analogy. And you're right, there were some pretty interesting nuggets buried in these reports. For starters, what about their executive compensation and this clawback policy? What is a clawback policy anyway?
Clawback policy, all right?
Yeah.
Think of it as a safety net for the company.
Mm,
It basically allows them to recoup some of that incentive-based compensation from executives under certain circumstances.
mm,
Like imagine an executive gets a big fat bonus based on inflated earnings,
right,
and then later is discovered that, oops, there was some creative accounting going on.
right. Some funny business.
The company can use this clawback policy to get that bonus back.
Oh, so it's a way to kind of hold those executives accountable.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
got it. It's all about aligning their interests, with the long-term health of the company.
Okay, that makes sense. Now let's circle back to their unique stock structure for a minute. I'm still wrapping my head around that whole Class A versus Class B stock thing. Does it create any potential conflicts of interest?
It's definitely something to consider
Yeah.
because the founding family holds most of those Class B shares, remember, the ones with all the voting power. They essentially have the final say on major decisions,
Right.
which, on one hand, it can be a good thing, provide stability, make sure the company stays true to its original vision and all.
Right.
But on the other hand, it does raise some questions about whether the interest of those other shareholders, the ones holding Class A stock, are really being represented.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's a bit of a tightrope walk.
It is.
Okay. Onto their investment portfolio, those bonds they're holding. You mentioned that their value can fluctuate. What would cause them to lose value, and how would that impact Cato?
All right. Bonds.
Right.
Imagine you bought a bond a while back, right? And it pays a certain interest rate. But now new bonds are being issued with higher interest rates.
Okay. Suddenly, your older bond with that lower rate, well, it's not as attractive to investors anymore.
Makes sense?
They wouldn't want to buy it from you unless you lower the price.
Right.
That's basically how bond values go up and down, in response to all those changing interest rates.
So if interest rates keep climbing, as they have been lately, Cato's bond portfolio could take a hit.
That's right. And if the value of those investments drops significantly, well, that directly impacts their cash flow. Potentially limits their ability to invest in new stores, upgrades, marketing, all that.
Okay, getting a little nervous now. But on the flip side, they don't seem to have a ton of debt,
Hmm.
right? Compared to some other companies. Isn't that a good thing?
It is. Their long-term debt as of February 3rd, 2024, was only $27.4 million,
Okay.
which is actually pretty low for a company their size.
Right.
It suggests they've been pretty careful, about taking on too much debt. Gives them more flexibility, especially in these uncertain times. So that's a point in their favor. But they did mention amending that revolving credit agreement several times, right? Doesn't that suggest they might need to borrow more money soon?
You're picking up on all the right details. It does raise that question, doesn't it? Are they starting to feel the squeeze and maybe needing to tap into more credit? And with those interest rates climbing, well, borrowing gets more expensive.
Yeah, which eats into their profit.
Exactly. So there's definitely something to watch.
Okay. I'm officially adding that to my watch list. Now, back to their reliance on those overseas manufacturers for a minute. We keep circling back to this, and I think it's because it seems like a pretty big deal. Like they're putting a lot of eggs in one basket.
It's definitely a double-edged sword, right? Sourcing from those overseas manufacturers, particularly in Southeast Asia, it allows them to, uh, it allows them to offer those low prices that their customers love.
Right. Got to keep those prices low.
But it also makes them, vulnerable, to all sorts of global disruptions. Remember, they mentioned the drought in the Panama Canal region, the conflict near the Suez Canal, the congestion at those Asian
Yeah,
ports.
like a perfect storm.
All of those things, they've impacted their ability to get their merchandise on time, and they probably contributed to those higher costs.
Yeah. And it's not just natural disasters or political instability we got to think about. What about, labor practices, ethical sourcing? Those are things that consumers are becoming more aware of, and they're looking to support companies that are transparent and responsible.
Absolutely. Those are all important considerations.
Okay, so let's talk about those internal controls again. They said they're effective, but can we really just take their word for it?
Well, it's always wise to be a little bit skeptical. Remember, those internal controls are only as good as the people who are actually implementing and following them.
Right.
It's like having a state-of-the-art security system, but forgetting to set the alarm.
Yeah, that kind of defeats the purpose.
Right. And let's not forget that the auditor did raise concerns about that potential impairment of long-lived assets, which suggests there might be some weaknesses in their controls,
Hmm.
around how they're valuing those assets.
Okay, so that auditor's note was not just a minor detail.
Yeah,
It could be a sign of bigger issues.
it could be.
All right. Now, what about their credit card segment? They offer their own credit cards to customers, right?
They do.
That seems kind of risky, especially in this economy.
It is. It's like they're operating this mini bank,
Hmm.
right? Which comes with a whole set of challenges. They're making money, sure, through those finance charges and late fees,
Right.
but they're also exposed to the risk of customers, defaulting on those payments.
Hmm.
And with inflation and interest rates rising, more and more people are struggling.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be surprising to see those delinquencies and write-offs
Oh.
increase, which would definitely hurt Cato's bottom line.
So it's a gamble.
It is.
Yeah. They're hoping to make money off of those credit cards, but it could backfire if things get worse economically. Now let's talk about technology. How are they adapting to the digital age? Are they embracing e-commerce, all those fancy online shopping tools?
Well, they're kind of they're dipping their toes in the water, you could say, but they're definitely not diving in head first.
Right.
Remember how we talked about their online sales being minuscule?
Yeah, less than 5%.
They're facing some serious competition from those online giants like Amazon
Right.
and other retailers who've really embraced that whole online presence.
It's almost like they're trying to fight a 21st century battle with 20th century weapons.
You could say that. They do have some potential,
Mhm.
to leverage those physical stores they have.
Right?
They could try creating a more seamless omni-channel experience,
Mhm.
things like offering in-store pickup for online orders,
Yeah.
letting customers return online purchases at the store.
Yeah.
But to really compete in this digital world, they're going to need to invest heavily,
Yeah.
build a robust e-commerce platform, Improve that website functionality, create a more engaging online shopping experience.
Yeah. It sounds like they've got some catching up to do. And it's not just about selling clothes online. They also need to think about, cybersecurity.
Oh, absolutely. With all that sensitive customer data they're collecting, they're basically a prime target for those hackers out there.
Right.
Now, their reports did mention some of the steps they're taking to protect their systems and that customer information,
Okay.
but it's an ongoing battle. Cyber threats, they're constantly evolving. Got to stay one step ahead. It's like this arms race where the weapons keep getting more and more sophisticated.
Okay. You've convinced me. Cybersecurity is not just an IT issue, it's a business critical issue. Now, back to the financials. They mentioned selling a piece of land they were holding for investment. What was that all about?
Oh, yeah, that was an interesting move. They sold that land in the second quarter of 2024, made a $3.2 million gain, which, provided a nice little boost to their income statement.
Right.
But it also raises some questions, doesn't it? Like, what was their motivation? Were they just taking advantage of a hot real estate market?
Mm.
Or were they trying to raise some cash quickly, to maybe bolster those declining cash reserves?
Hmm. It's like a financial mystery.
It is.
Speaking of mysteries, what about their inventory levels? They've dropped significantly, haven't they? Is that a good sign or a bad sign?
Well, it could be either, depending on the reason, right? They reported a 14.8% decrease in inventory compared to the previous year. Now, that could mean they're getting better, at managing their stock, avoiding those costly markdowns. But it could also mean they're struggling with those supply chain issues we talked about. Maybe having trouble getting the products they need.
So it's like they're walking this tightrope, trying to find that sweet spot between, having enough inventory to meet demand, but not having so much that it ends up just sitting there gathering dust on the shelves.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about executive compensation.
Huh?
How are Cato's executives being rewarded, especially considering the company's, less than stellar performance?
Executive compensation. Well, their filings go into a lot of detail about those compensation packages.
Hmm.
The salaries, bonuses, stock awards, the whole nine yards.
Right.
And some folks might say that, that the executives are being overpaid,
Right.
especially given those declining sales and profits.
Mm.
Others might argue that, that competitive compensation is necessary to attract and retain that top talent, even when times are tough.
It's a tough one. I mean, you want to reward those at the helm for steering the ship, but if the ship's starting to sink, it's hard to justify, those lavish bonuses.
Yeah, you define that balance.
So what about dividends? Are they still paying those out to shareholders?
They are. Historically, they've been pretty consistent with those dividend payments, which has made them attractive, to those income-seeking investors.
Right.
But with their financial performance weakening, some analysts are wondering if they can really keep it up. Any decision to cut or reduce that dividend, well, that would likely spook investors.
Yeah. It would send a pretty clear signal that things might be worse than they appear.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're playing a high-stakes poker game. Now, on to their relationships with their suppliers. We've talked about the risks, but are there any positives to, to working with those overseas manufacturers?
Well, they do highlight the importance of building those strong long-term relationships with their suppliers, mainly in Southeast Asia. That can help ensure quality and reliable delivery, which is super important in this fast-paced fashion world.
Makes sense.
But they also need to be mindful of, those ethical sourcing and labor practices we talked about. Consumers are paying attention to that stuff. They want to support companies that are doing the right thing.
Right, so it's a balancing act for sure.
Definitely yes.
Okay, shifting gears again, let's talk about their real estate strategy. That vast network of stores, mostly in strip malls. How's that working out for them?
Real estate strategy. Okay, well, it's a mixed bag, you could say. Those traditional store locations, they offer convenience, they're visible,
Right.
but they're also vulnerable to to the shifts we're seeing in the retail world. With online shopping on the rise, malls struggling to attract shoppers,
Right.
they're facing some intense competition, not just from those other brick-and-mortar retailers, but also from those online giants we talked about.
Yeah, those guys are everywhere.
Now, they have been closing some underperforming stores, trying to open new ones in, more promising locations.
Okay.
But they're going to need to be nimble, innovative, to really adapt.
Maybe they need to think outside the box a little bit. What about experimenting with smaller format stores, or pop-up shops? Maybe even partnering with other businesses to share space.
Those are great ideas.
Yeah.
The future of brick and mortar retail, it's uncertain, but those who are willing to experiment, to embrace those new approaches, they have the best chance of survival. Now, we've talked a lot about those challenges they're facing, but let's not forget um, about their core strength. That focus on value pricing.
Right. Offering trendy clothes at those affordable prices.
Exactly.
But can they really maintain that value proposition, while also dealing with all these rising costs, the supply chain disruptions, all that competition?
That's the million-dollar question. They're going to need to be really smart about how they manage those costs,
Right.
negotiate effectively with those suppliers, find ways to streamline their operations without sacrificing quality.
Hmm.
And they're going to have to be strategic about their pricing.
Yeah. Maybe they need to find ways to differentiate themselves beyond just price. Maybe focus more on quality or sustainability, or even creating a more unique brand experience.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. They need to give those customers a reason to choose Cato, over all those other options out there.
So give them a reason to believe.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's not just about offering the lowest price. It's about, offering a combination of value, quality, and a shopping experience that really resonates with their customers.
Right. They need to give those customers a reason to choose Cato, over all those other options out there.
All right, now let's talk about their environmental and social impact. We've touched on this a bit already, but it seems like it seems like there's room for improvement there.
Yeah, you're right. They are a bit behind the curve when it comes um, to sustainability and social responsibility.
Okay.
They could really benefit from being more transparent about their efforts in areas like, ethical sourcing, environmental protection, diversity and inclusion, community engagement, all of that.
Right. It's not just about doing the right thing. It's also about, letting people know that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
All right, now let's talk about attracting and retaining top talent. How's Cato doing in that department?
Well, the retail industry, it's notorious for high turnover rates.
Right.
So finding and keeping those skilled employees is a constant battle. Cato does mention employee training and development in their
Yeah.
reports, which is good,
Okay.
but they could definitely do more to create a culture you know, that really values employees,
Mhm.
offers opportunities for growth, recognizes achievements, promotes work-life balance, all of that.
It's about creating a workplace where people feel valued, and motivated to do their best, not just a place to punch the clock.
Exactly.
Now, onto something a bit less tangible but equally important, corporate culture. What's the vibe like at Cato?
Corporate culture, yeah. It's tough to get a read on that just from their reports. But it's definitely something that investors should be paying attention to. Is it a collaborative environment? Does it foster innovation? Are employees empowered to make decisions and take ownership? Is there a clear sense of mission and purpose?
Yeah, a strong and positive culture can really make a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. It can be a real competitive advantage.
Now, let's talk about social responsibility. How is Cato addressing those broader societal issues and, showing that they're committed to making a positive impact on the world?
Well, their reports are pretty quiet on this front, which is a bit of a concern.
Right.
Consumers, especially those younger generations, they're really looking for brands that align with their values.
Yeah.
Cato could benefit from being more transparent about their efforts in areas like supporting local communities, promoting diversity and inclusion, advocating for social justice, all of that.
It's not just about selling clothes anymore.
Nope.
It's about, being a good corporate citizen.
Exactly.
Now, what about their growth strategy? They've mentioned expanding their store footprint, enhancing their online presence, developing new product categories. Are these the right moves?
Well, they definitely need to be strategic about their growth. Chasing growth just for the sake of growth, well, that can lead to some pretty costly mistakes.
Yeah, you got to be smart about it.
They need to focus on areas where they have a clear competitive advantage
Right.
and where they can generate sustainable long-term value.
Okay. Now, what about innovation? Are they embracing those new technologies, Are they finding creative ways to adapt to this constantly changing world?
Well, they are taking some steps, but they could definitely be bolder.
Okay.
The retail industry, it's constantly evolving, and the companies that are willing to experiment, embrace new ideas, they're the ones that are going to thrive.
Well, maybe they need to bring in some fresh perspectives. shake things up a bit.
Maybe, create a culture where it's okay to fail sometimes.
Yeah,
You got to learn from those mistakes, right?
absolutely.
Now, what about intellectual property? Do they have any patents, trademarks, other valuable assets that they need um, to protect?
Intellectual property, all right.
Mm.
Their main intellectual property assets are their trademarks.
Yeah,
The ones that protect their brand names and logos.
right.
Those are crucial, especially in the fashion world where branding is everything.
Makes sense.
They need to be vigilant about monitoring the marketplace.
Hmm.
Making sure nobody's trying to rip off their trademarks.
Yeah, like guarding those crown jewels.
Exactly.
All right, let's talk data. That gold mine of information that companies are collecting these days. How is Cato using data to understand their customers better and make smarter decisions?
Data, yeah. They are collecting a ton of data through their website, their loyalty programs, those in-store transactions.
Right.
And they could be using this data to gain some really valuable insights,
Okay.
into customer preferences, buying habits, market trends. Right.
That kind of information can help them, you know, improve their product assortment, personalize their marketing, optimize their pricing, even create a uh, a more seamless and enjoyable shopping experience.
Yeah, it's like having a, a crystal ball that can predict the future.
You could say that,
Yeah.
but of course there are ethical considerations as well.
Right.
Data privacy, security, those are paramount.
Yeah.
They need to be transparent with their customers about how they're using that data,
Right.
and they need to make sure they have really strong security measures in place to protect that information from breaches and misuse.
It's all about finding that balance,
It is.
between using data to improve that customer experience, but also respecting privacy and building trust.
Exactly. Got to
Uh,
find that sweet spot.
All right, now let's talk about customer service. How's Cato doing in that department?
Customer service.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, their reports do emphasize their commitment to providing excellent customer service,
Right.
and they're right to prioritize that. In today's retail environment, exceptional customer service, it can really set you apart.
But what does excellent customer service really look like?
Well, it's about going above and beyond, right?
Right.
To meet those customer needs and expectations, being responsive, helpful, empathetic, resolving issues quickly and efficiently, and just leaving those customers with a positive feeling.
Yeah, it's about creating an experience that's so good, people can't help but tell their friends about it.
Word of mouth, the best kind of marketing.
Now let's talk risk management. What are some of the key risks that Cato is facing, and how are they dealing with them?
Risk management.
Mhm.
Okay, well, their reports, they outline some of those key risks. Things like the economic uncertainty, those supply chain disruptions we keep talking about, competition, cybersecurity threats.
Right.
And they mention some steps they're taking to manage those risks,
Right.
like diversifying their supplier base,
Hmm.
investing in cybersecurity, closely monitoring that credit card portfolio.
But is that enough?
Well, the world's changing so fast, it seems like new risks are popping up every day.
Right.
Risk management, it's not a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an ongoing process.
Okay.
They need to constantly be assessing their risk profile, adapting their strategies, and being prepared to respond to those unexpected events.
It's like sailing a ship in a storm.
You got it. You got to constantly adjust your course if you want to stay afloat.
Okay. I'm feeling a little seasick just thinking about it. Now, on to corporate social responsibility. How is Cato, how are they demonstrating their commitment to those social and environmental issues?
Well, their reports are pretty vague on this, which is a little concerning.
Yeah.
Consumers, especially those younger generations, they really want to support brands that are aligned with their values.
Yeah.
Cato could really benefit from being more upfront about their efforts in areas like sustainability, ethical sourcing, all of that.
It's about more than just making a profit. It's about making a positive impact on the world.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about succession planning. Who's next in line to lead Cato?
Succession planning. That's a great question. And unfortunately, the reports don't really give us much to go on.
Right.
Given that the founding family still controls the company,
Right.
it would be reassuring for investors to know, is there a plan? Is there a clear succession plan in place?
Yeah.
To ensure a smooth transition when the time comes.
It's like having a backup quarterback ready to go just in case the starter gets injured.
Exactly. You got to have a plan.
All right. Now, before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to that critical audit matter that the auditor raised. Why should we be concerned about that potential impairment of their assets, especially those store locations?
Yeah, that's a good point. Remember, the auditor's basically waving a big red flag, saying, hey, there's a chance those stores might not be worth as the company's claiming. And that's especially concerning given the state of brick-and-mortar retail these days.
So it's not just an accounting technicality.
Nope.
It could be a sign of deeper problems.
Exactly. It raises questions about their real estate strategy, their ability to adapt, even the long-term viability of their whole business model.
All right. Well, that's definitely food for thought. Now, on to supply chain transparency. These days, consumers want to know where the products are coming from, how they're made, what kind of impact they're having on the environment and society. So, how is Cato addressing those concerns?
Supply chain transparency. Yeah, well, their reports are actually pretty quiet on this, which is a missed opportunity, I think. They could be highlighting any positive steps they're taking,
Yeah.
like ethical sourcing, fair labor practices, efforts to reduce their environmental impact.
It's a chance to really connect with those consumers who care about these things.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk about the role of government regulation. Love it or hate it, it's a reality that businesses have to deal with. So, how is regulation impacting Cato?
Government regulation. Well, those regulations, whether it's labor laws, environmental protection, product safety, they can have a big impact on retailers.
Right.
Now, some folks argue that those regulations, they just create, unnecessary burdens and costs for businesses. But others say that they're essential, to protect consumers, workers, the environment. Cato's going to need to navigate this complex landscape carefully, stay informed about those changing regulations, ensure compliance, and maybe even advocate for policies that are fair and beneficial to the industry as a whole.
It's like playing a game where the rules are constantly changing.
It is. Keeps you on your toes.
All right. Now on to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. What's Cato doing to promote a more inclusive and equitable workplace?
DEI, yeah, another important topic. The reports don't really provide a lot of detail on their DEI initiatives,
Okay.
which again is a bit of a missed opportunity. Consumers, particularly those younger generations, they're holding companies accountable for this stuff.
Right.
They want to support businesses that reflect their values,
Yeah.
that are committed to creating a more just and equitable world. Cato could really benefit from being more open about their DEI goals, their initiatives, the progress they're making.
It's about more than just checking
Oh,
boxes.
for sure.
It's about creating a culture where everyone feels welcome and respected and empowered to succeed.
Exactly.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about employee engagement. Are Cato's employees passionate about their work? Are they committed to the company's success?
Employee engagement. It's a great question, and it's a tough one to answer just from their reports. They do mention, employee training and development, which is good,
Right.
but they could be doing more to really measure and track employee engagement. Maybe implement some strategies to boost engagement. Things like offering more professional development opportunities, recognizing and rewarding achievements, fostering a more positive and supportive work environment.
Because when employees are engaged, they're more productive,
That's
more
that.
creative, more likely to stick around. It's a win-win for everyone.
It is. Keeps everybody happy.
Now, let's talk about something that can be, a bit nerve-wracking for investors: market volatility. The stock market can be a wild ride, and retail stocks in particular, they're often very sensitive to those economic ups and downs.
Oh, absolutely. Cato's stock price, it's been pretty volatile in recent years, which reflects those challenges they've been facing.
Right.
Investors really need to be prepared for more of that volatility, and they should really try to focus on the company's long-term prospects, not just those short-term fluctuations in the stock price.
Yeah, it's about playing the long game, not the short game.
Exactly.
And remember, past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
Right. It's not a guarantee.
All right. Speaking of the future, let's talk strategic planning. Where is Cato headed, and how are they gonna get there?
Strategic planning. Okay. Well, the reports do mention some of their key strategic initiatives, expanding those stores, enhancing that online presence, developing new product categories.
Right.
But it would be really helpful if they provided a bit more detail about their long-term vision. their competitive strategy, those specific steps they're taking to reach those goals.
Yeah, it's like having a roadmap, to show you how you're going to get from point A to point B.
Exactly.
All right, now let's talk about something that can be tough to quantify, but it's incredibly valuable. Brand equity. What's the Cato brand worth?
Brand equity, or well, they have been around for over 60 years,
Yeah.
so they've definitely built up some brand recognition,
Yeah.
some customer loyalty.
Right.
But in today's market, that's not enough.
Okay.
They need to keep working, maintain and enhance that brand equity.
Right.
Maybe refresh those marketing campaigns, update those store designs, maybe even collaborate with other brands to create some buzz.
Yeah. They need to stay relevant, keep evolving.
Absolutely.
Now, onto a trend that's really gaining momentum these days, ESG investing. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it's all about considering a company's impact on the world when making those investment decisions. So how does Cato stack up when it comes to ESG factors?
ESG, yeah. It's a hot topic. And their reports, they don't offer a whole lot of insight into their ESG performance,
Okay.
which could be a bit of a red flag for some investors who are really who are focused on these issues.
Hmm.
They could really benefit from being more transparent about their efforts in areas like reducing their environmental footprint, promoting ethical sourcing, all of that good stuff.
It's not just about doing the right things. It's about letting people know that you're doing the right things.
Exactly. Got to walk the walk and talk the talk.
Now let's talk about something that's crucial for efficiency and profitability. Operational excellence. How good is Cater at doing things right, doing them well, and doing them cost effectively?
Operational excellence.
Huh.
All right. Their reports don't really dive too deep into their operational efficiency,
Yeah.
but it's definitely an area where they could focus more attention.
Okay.
In a competitive industry like retail, even those small improvements in areas uh, like supply chain management, inventory control, store operations, all of that.
Right.
Well, it can make a big difference to their bottom line.
Yeah, it's all about streamlining those processes, eliminating waste, and just constantly looking for ways to do more with less.
Absolutely. Efficiency is key.
All right, now on to the holy grail of retail: customer loyalty. How good is Cato at turning those one-time shoppers into loyal repeat customers?
Customer loyalty. Okay, so they do mention, their commitment to customer service and their focus on value pricing,
Right.
which are both important, of course.
Right.
But they could also benefit from, maybe implementing some loyalty programs, personalizing those marketing efforts, just creating a more a more seamless and enjoyable experience for those shoppers, no matter how they're choosing to shop.
It's all about it's about making those customers feel valued and appreciated.
Absolutely. You want to keep them coming back for more.
All right. Well, I think it's time to wrap things up. But before we do, let's take a moment to ponder the big question: what does the future hold for the retail industry, and what does it all mean for Cato?
The future of retail, huh? Well, it's definitely it's a landscape that's in constant motion.
Yeah.
You know, technology is changing things, consumer habits are changing, the global economy is throwing curveballs.
Yeah, it's a lot to keep up with.
It's a challenging environment,
Yeah.
but it's also, it's also full of opportunities for those who are willing to, to adapt and innovate.
So Cato's at a crossroads.
You could say that. They need to decide, are they going to cling to the past or embrace the future?
Right.
Are they going to be a follower or a leader?
Yeah.
The choices they make now, they're going to determine their fate down the road.
This deep dive has been it's been a real eye-opener. We've gone beyond just the headlines and really dug into the complexities of Cato's business.
That's what we do.
And, armed with this knowledge, well, hopefully our listeners are better equipped to follow Cato's journey, assess their prospects, and maybe even, make some informed decisions of their own.
That's the goal.
So, to our listeners, we leave you with this final thought. Imagine you're at the helm of Cato. What bold move would you make to steer this company towards a brighter future? Until next time, keep diving.
Happy diving, everyone.